Well, hello, folks. Welcome to the simulcast broadcast on Radio FM 88 Australia, broadcasting live in the studios in Brisbane and going live on Facebook and YouTube. If you wish to participate, it's Radio FM 88 Australia. And I'm going to hand over to Andrena, and she's going to bring our guest from the UK on board. It's good morning to you, Andrena.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's Dream in the New Dream. And today's the 23rd of the 2nd, 2023. So today, it's my great privilege and honour to have Michael Forrester as our guest today. And I had the privilege to meet Michael probably about 6 weeks ago now. And it all started with my sister Carol picking up one of his books and reading it. She read it in the night. She loved it. She contacted Michael and wrote him an email. And then we all arranged to meet for coffee because Michael was probably about an hour down that way, or maybe that away. We arranged to meet for coffee and we had a lovely connection. And we were gifted with books. I've read Forest Rain, which was really beautiful. And I think the thing that touched me more than anything was when you wrote about sitting with your father when he was about to pass over. And that touched me very much because it brought memories back when I sat with my mum, as she was about to pass over. So that was funny. Out of all what I read, that was the thing that touched me the most. So it's what we experience and can share with people because we've gone through that experience. Anyway, I'm not going to waffle anymore. I'm going to hand it over to Michael. You've got such a profound journey that you've been on. You're such an inspiration. And you class yourself as a deafened author, not deaf. And that's another story in itself. So without further ado, welcome, Michael. And thank you for agreeing to come on the show.
I'm delighted to be here, Andrena. And Jeffrey, thank you for inviting us to Australia as well. It's remarkable, isn't it, what technology can do now? We wisp across the world on the power of electronics and find ourselves together, connected in community with people. What are we, 12,000 miles away? Is that right? Something like that? A great distance. Disappears because of the power of technology. And it touches me really with the thought that we create distance as illusion. We make distance something it doesn't need to be. We talk about being distanced from one another, and we think of geographical distance as being some reason for separateness. Whereas the reality is it's actually so easy to reach out and connect heart to heart, so long as there is a willingness on all sides to do that. So I am delighted, I want to say ecstatic to be here, to be able to share with you and connect with you, to go beyond that presenting appearance of this body and that body, to touch soul to soul. I hope we'll have a wonderful time doing so today.
I know I curse technology lots of times, but it gives us, like you say, gives us the gift of connecting. All right, Jeffrey. So would you like to share your journey? Because I know you lost your hearing at a young age, and I've got no idea. I couldn't imagine what that was like.
I didn't become aware of hearing loss until I was 30 years of age. So I grew up in a hearing world with hearing, and that was not a great influence on me until we got into mature adult life. Before that, life was in most respects very similar to everybody else's. I had, in fact, in relative terms, a privileged upbringing. I came from a middle-class British home where the values were very emphatic on achievement and education and moving forward and becoming more than you were. In fact, it traces back another generation again. Both my parents were born in humble, what you might say, working class circumstances. My father was the son of a shoemaker in the East End of London, and my mother was the daughter of a South Wales coal miner. And that person, my mother's father, my grandfather, is one of my earliest memories as being a profound influence on my life. So I have a number of readings to go through here today, if I may. The first one I'd like is an as yet unpublished poem about my grandfather called Bamper's Fire. Home from the night shift, Bamper is putting fire. His blackened fingers build a tower of coal over a bed of sticks and sheets torn from old copies of the Apostolic Times. He strikes a safety match, touches it to the paper, waits for the flame to ignite the hidden parts. When tongues of fire rise up, he covers them with small coal and a blanket of dust, that the fire might burn hotter, then pulls down the damper to heat the water. Hands washed, he ignores admonitions from his daughter, my mother, that I have already eaten, and sits me on his lap. Cutting shapes of doors and windows in his toast, he feeds them to me. Ritual complete, he sleeps. I am warmed by his fire. I was the tower he was building. Long I lay, and safe upon those Pentecostal pages, that bed of sticks. I burned all the hotter for the blanket of his love laid over me. He would have cut out his eyes and heart to feed me if he had thought that they would have brought me closer to the light. His memory pulls the damper even now. He sleeps. I am still warmed by his fire.
Beautiful. Very powerful. And I know reading your poetry and your words, you've got such a gift with words and how you bring them across, and you do touch soul, don't you, with your words?
Thank you. I'm delighted to hear that.
And that's important, to touch soul, and heart to heart, soul to soul.
And we are so constrained by, shall we say, approved practices, normal ways of behavior, that there are things that are appropriate, things that are not appropriate. We don't get too close. We keep others back. We don't want to let anybody too close in case they should discover what's really going on inside. But the astonishment is that once we begin to open and allow our inner parts to be accessible, we discover that what we have and what we are inside, all the experience, all the challenges, all the joys, all of that is shared experience. That what's going on for you is exactly the same as what's going on for me. And suddenly all of that fear evaporates. And here we are, connected. You are the same as me. That's the joy of taking the risk, bringing down the barriers and connecting soul to soul.
Right. Well, obviously, for you to lose your hearing, that must have been traumatic. And I'm not sure if it's my signal because it's fading in and out at the moment. So, yeah, so that was like a huge grief, carrying a grief of loss.
Let me first of all put it in context. I was brought up to be very challenged and to push myself very hard. I think my parents aspired for great achievement for both myself and my elder brother. And in the early days, certainly we did achieve. We both got excellent exam results. We both went to the same college at Oxford University. So there we were, launching out onto a life of immense success. I got married very early, had children very young, and put myself under a great deal of pressure. And I think there was this unconscious sense, got to do more, got to achieve more, got to push harder. And then one way or another, we all experience it at some point in our lives. All of the expectations we've built, all of the planning we've done, something happens and drops an enormous great bomb in the middle of it. And for me, it was hearing. I had no expectation of this, although people later told me they'd been aware that I was losing my hearing. I was missing what was being said a long time before I became aware. So I went along to the doctor when I first started to realize that something wasn't quite right. And he gave me a very sophisticated text. He went and stood in the corner and he read from his newspaper like this. And I said, when are you going to start? And he said, I've already finished. And he said, we know what's wrong. You can't hear. So they bundled me off to a specialist in Harley Street in the centre of London, who arranged for me to be fitted with a hearing aid. And then they bundled me off home and told me to get on with life again. And in fact, that's covered. I won't be reading it today, but all of that experience of the impact and the scariness of hearing loss is actually covered in an essay in Forest Rain called Going, Going, Gone. So there I was at the age of 30. I'd just become self-employed as a management consultant after a training in accountancy. I had a young family with mortgages, school fees, and all the rest of it. And suddenly you discover you're going deaf. And the biggest issue of all of that was nobody was able to give me a prognosis. No one was able to tell me what was going to happen because nobody knew. The process of hearing loss is different for everybody. And I found myself simultaneously challenged by the fact that on the one side, there were things I just had to do. I had to sustain, I had to perform, I had to provide for a family. And I had to be impressive, didn't I? Because it's terribly important that you impress people. Terribly important that you're a high achiever. At least that was what my upbringing had taught me. And then on the other hand, I'm sitting there inside quaking with fear, not knowing what my capabilities were going to be, and frankly, not really believing in myself. And there then ensued a period of great depression, great challenge, where I was living a dual life. I'd wake up in the morning feeling beyond negative, that some of the darkness was there, swirl around me, and I'd get in the car and I'd drive off to my appointment for the day, and I'd shut the door in the car and lock it, and suddenly I'd turn into somebody different, and I'd present as collected and together and articulate. It would be every inch the city management consultant. When actually what was going on inside was this turmoil, this fear of my incapability, which I never believed in myself. And now added to it, this inability to hear what people are saying. How long am I going to be able to hear what you say to me across a boardroom table? When are you going to decide that's too difficult and stop giving me assignments to do? So there's huge, great fears and challenges. And all of that finally in my 40s resulted in an enormous crisis. By that time, I was under treatment for depression. I was misdiagnosed, in my opinion, as being bipolar. And I'd been put on medication for bipolar disorder, which took me in a very strange direction, to the point where, when life's challenges became too much, I made a very serious suicide attempt. And I did not expect to wake up the next morning, which I did. One of those strange things happened. I got up from the hospital bed, and 48 hours later, I was back at my desk. I was running a very different kind of business by this time. I worked in the care industry. And as if on the face of it, on the veneer, nothing had happened. But because I was containing it all inside, I had this ability to look the part, whereas actually what was going on was this great viper's nest of swirling uncertainty, loss of confidence. That event, that suicide attempt in the millennium, in 2002 actually, January 1st, 2002, led to a spiritual awakening and a complete change of depression. And I've been writing for some time by this time. I've been writing business books. I'm successful as an author of business books. But at the turn of the millennium, that all began to change, and I started to write inspirationally, creatively. And so I went through this experience, and one of the first things that I wrote, which is contained in Forrest, was an essay called Declaration of Self-Worth, which I'd like to read to you.
Yes, please.
Weep and heal, my friend, weep and heal. And as you weep, anoint me with the tears that wash away your pain, that I too may take healing from your weeping. We have allowed the leeches to bleed us dry for fear of losing what we never had. We've listened until mesmerized by the words that proclaim our inadequacies in the eyes of another. We've screamed in silent agony at the withdrawal of conditional love, whose requirements we can no longer satisfy. We've shaken in misery at the prospect of losing love that was not love. We've been fashioned in the same furnace, you and I. We've held the same pain in our hearts, giving until we can give no more. We've faced the same dark pit of depression and learned, slowly and painfully, to drag ourselves up its rocky walls. We've emerged at the edge with bleeding hands and knees, but stronger, much stronger in the knowledge that we are survivors. We have recognized that without unconditional love, there is no life worth clinging to. We have contemplated death in the face of loneliness. We've reached beyond the limits of endurance and known the angels stoop to carry us when we can walk no more. We sat in silent meditation and confronted lives of transparent emptiness for future decades that we know we can no longer endure. We are resolute. No more will we cut our hands and feet as we dance around the altar of another's whims in forlorn hope that our deity will come to ignite the sacrifice. No more will we throw the children of our own underdeveloped aspirations into the volcanoes of appeasement to placate the angry gods and goddesses. We've taken the surgeon's knife of separation to the cancer of codependency in a final act of self-absolution. We will no longer supplicate with the congregations of the acquiescent that worship in the cathedrals of self-deprecation. We've determined that now is the time to rise, that now we shall reach for the light, that now we shall claim our birthright in the grace of new intimacy, and that now we shall lay hold of the promise of infusing joy. For we are the survivors of love going forward, and we have that we are.
Powerful. Did you want to say something then,
feel
Jeffrey?
Like yeah, you feel like Stratford on Avon in the doing a Shakespeare rendition.
So people have sometimes been very generous and compared me to some of the better known writers in the past, and Shakespeare's not the first time I've heard his name mentioned.
Amazing. Okay, so I know I would love you to share about Matt, the dog that changed your life. And I know when Carol and I met you, we just assumed Matt was with you. And of course, we were sort of because we're both dog lovers. So we were disappointed when you were there by yourself, with respect, of course.
When Matt was with me, certainly he was beyond question the star of the show. I was the prop, the assistant that was there to give star support to the leading light. But he became a leading light in my life, yes, and he was with me, in fact, for 15 years as my hearing dog. I don't know how familiar your viewers and listeners will be to the concept of hearing dogs, but essentially they do the same thing for hearing disabled people as a guide dog will do for a blind person. So Matt became my ears in 2004 when we arrived. And if I may just talk a little bit about that arrival, as you've shown the book, If It Wasn't for That Dog, written in 2008 and still my most popular book, it must be said. And here's a little excerpt that talks about what happened when I first became aware he was coming to me. On Thursday morning, I was at home in the flat meditating. Without warning, a vision appeared, and a most unusual one at that. Believe this or not as you choose, but an apparition of a dog came to visit, a Springer Spaniel. Now, for those that don't experience such things, I know how strange this will sound, but I can only report reality as I experience it. And on this occasion, I was being visited, or so it appeared, by the spirit of a dog while I was in trance. This rather large, diaphanous creature appeared on the other side of the room, sniffed the air, then walked over to me wagging its tail. And it jumped up, placing its paws between my legs on the sofa where I was sitting. It sniffed around me just as dogs are prone to do, and I responded by talking to it and reaching out my hand to it. And I told it to go and have a look around the flat. It bounded off inquisitively for a few moments. I waited and mused for its return. Seeing it nose its way around, it was evident to me that a dog this size in a little flat like mine would be a problem. Assuming it to be the spirit of the dog I had been getting, I said to it, I don't think I can have you here. You're too big. If this indeed was to be my dog, I was thinking I would delay accepting it until I moved. And it sniffed me again and promptly disappeared. Not so long later, I was innocently pottering around the flat one morning, attending to this or that largely insignificant task, when the poster dropped through the letterbox. I took the letters into the kitchen and eventually reached the bottom of the pile of big white ones and tore open the last envelope. I extracted a pile of papers, including a covering letter that was upside down. And as I turned it round to read it, out of the pack dropped a photograph, which froze me to the spot. It was a picture of a dog. In fact, it was that picture of a dog. My immediate thought was, gotta have that dog. Black and white, seated obligingly for the photographer, he gave exactly the impression you get of a small boy having his first school photo taken. Tie back, collar open and cap lopsided. The appeal was overwhelming. Got to have that dog. His head was slightly to one side and his lips seemed to curl up in a wise guy kind of smile that said, I'm on best behavior. Please adopt me. Got to have that dog. I was whisked to the floor. I stood there motionless for a few minutes, just staring at the photograph. this stage, I couldn't think straight enough to read the letter, but I presumed that I was being offered a chance for this endearing, scruffy urchin of delight to become my hearing dog. And from that point, it was exactly like falling in love. Nothing whatsoever else mattered. I had got to have that dog! And so 3 months later, he appeared.
Yeah, no, it is a beautiful story.
The fact that on the front cover there are a couple of credits here. I don't know if you can get the book up on screen, Jeffrey, because the first of those two, that's the one, first of those two quotes is from the very well-known, now late British author Sir Anthony Jay, writer of Yes Minister. And he gave me that quote. He lived very close to where I lived at the time in Somerset. And a copy of the manuscript came into hand. And he, in fact, was helpful in me exploring the first possibilities of publication for the book. As it turned out, if you go a little bit further down that cover, Jeffrey, the other quote was given to me by Dr. Bruce Fogel, who was the co-founder, as it says there, of Hearing Dogs for Deaf People. Oh, look, there's a typo on the cover. I thought we got rid of all of that.
I was going to ask.
If you buy the book, the typo's gone. But there we are. Those were the two people that commented on the book, and who, both in their different ways, gave me help to achieve publication for it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what is oath hearing?
So Matt was with me for 15 years. And just to expand a little bit on the concept of what hearing dogs do, they have two functions. They have a sound work function where they will hear. Matt would hear sounds around my home. So if the smoke alarm went off or the doorbell rang or something like that, he'd come and tell me by putting his paws on my knee. And my response was supposed to be, what is it? And then, unless it was a danger sound, he would lead me to the source of the sound. So he'd take me to the front door, or if the cooker timer was gone off or something like that. So the sounds he'd been trained on. Except in the case of a danger sound, like the smoke alarm, because you don't want to be taken to the danger. In which case, when I said, what is it? He would then hit the floor. So he was very useful at a practical level in telling me what was going on around me when my hearing was not capable of doing so. But as most recipients of hearing dogs will tell you, the best and most significant function of the dog is actually not to do with those physical activities. It's because he acts as both a badge of an invisible disability and a bridge to other people. One of the things you find with hearing loss is you recede from verbal connection with people because you can't hear what's being said. So if you do try and make conversation, you'll find repeatedly that you haven't heard, and very often say the wrong and sometimes embarrassing things. So progressively withdraw consciously. And the dog being there in the uniform, has a special coat on, it's very, very obvious that there is something different here. I'm in the supermarket or whatever, you don't see dogs in the supermarket, and oh look, it's a hearing dog. I say that in the first year after Matt came to me, I probably had more conversations with people I didn't know than I'd had in the preceding 10 years. Is there a special breed of dog that's suitable, asks Jeffrey in the crib here. When I received Matt, the answer was no. They were using rescue dogs from wherever they could get them. But they found that there was a control issue, a rejection issue. A proportion of those dogs were being rejected. And eventually the charity that supplied him, Hearing Dogs for Deaf People, decided that they would do better to instigate their own breeding programs. So for a period of time, you would see many cockapoos around as hearing dogs, or sometimes Labradors. So I believe that is still the case, although I'm not actively in touch with them at the moment. I believe that they are working with dogs of their own breeds now. And I know they use spaniels, they use Poodles, they use cockapoos, coss, and I believe they use Labradors as well.
Mm. Mm. So I know you've got some funny stories to share about you and Matt.
Funny stories to share about Matt. Well, actually, there are many in the book. I would very much encourage you to take a look at it. But one that comes to mind.
Oh no.
One that comes to mind in
Mm.
particular. I'm a bit of a DIY freak, or used to be, as you'll find if you read some of the other books. I'm very bad at it. But I found myself needing something or other, and I went into B&Q, the D&Y warehouse we have in this country. I don't know whether you have an equivalent in Australia. Large retail units which sells everything under the sun for do-it-yourself and work relating to repairs and housing construction, things of that sort. So there I am with Matt beside me. And, we walk into the door, and there's a big burly security guard standing. And he's up here and I'm down here looking. He says to me, "Is yet one of them deaf dogs?" I thought, I can't resist. I said, "No, his hearing's perfectly good, thank you very much." And he looked at me and he said, "Well, if it's not one of them deaf dogs, it can't come in." So I looked at him and I explained to him the difference between a hearing dog and a deaf dog. And he duly let me into the B&Q on that occasion. Australia has Bunnings, whereas the UK has B&Q. Yeah. I know the sort of thing that I'm talking about. We seem to have lost Andrena.
Yeah, Andrena's, as you know, down in Dorset on the farming there. So quite often there is signal degradation. So she's using one of those special things there. You can pick up the signal booster. Obviously, it's playing up. Hey, she's back.
Right, where were we? So you've shared about beautiful Matt. So and that would have been a huge loss when he passed.
Forgive me, I didn't hear that. I need you to repeat it, please.
Regarding Matt, I mean that you've shared it's a beautiful book, beautiful stories, and that would have been obviously a huge loss when Matt passed away.
He remains an influence on my life, Andrena.
Yeah.
He gave me, without question, the 15 happiest years I'd ever known. And the quality of the connection was astonishing. Everybody loves their dogs, don't they? I think perhaps there is a special connection with an assistance dog, because you are dependent on the dog as much as the dog is dependent on you. And that symbiosis, you're aware of it, but the dog's aware of it as well. So he was always looking out for me. His loss, yes, definitely a challenge. And a little bit later, we'll be talking about my newest book coming out next month called Forest Pathways. And there is indeed an essay in Forest Pathways. Several essays in Forest Pathways, I should say, actually deal with Matt's latter years. And one in particular is called Last Dogs and deals with the last year of his life in particular. So he's gone on having an influence on my writing. He's gone on having an influence on, certainly on my book sales and my public speaking and so on, because everybody wants to tell him. I quite understand. He is very much still the star of the show.
Yeah. So I know you're quite a world traveler, and you've traveled to many countries sharing your wisdom, your poetry, and your readings. So I know you mentioned about the Goblin Child, which I haven't read yet. It's in the queue. So I believe you got a piece, a pound a piece from Forest Dawn.
What do you write about? People often ask me, and it's a very difficult question to answer because what I would say is an eclectic author. I write across all sorts of subjects. But these days, most of my writing tends to focus on spiritual topics, one way or another. And it finds its way out in fiction as much as it does in non-fiction. Now, Goblin Child is a short story collection written over 16 years from the turn of the century up to 2016. I just wanted to read one very short piece from here. This is called For Show and Tell. For show and tell this week, Miss said that we had to bring our gods to school. On Monday morning, we lined up outside the classroom, everybody holding tight onto the hand of their god. It's easy to lose a god if you're not careful, you know. But the gods were all well behaved, well, mostly anyway. Inside the classroom, Miss said to leave the gods in the corner by the coats. I'm afraid they got into a bit of a muddle, so that at time for show and tell, some of the kids couldn't find their own god. Then there were arguments over whose god was whose. Some of the kids started crying, others were fighting. Ali and Mary had grabbed the same god. They both said it was theirs and no one else's, and they pulled so hard it broke. With half each, and they won't speak to you. I suppose a bit of a god is better than no god at all. But I think it would be better to share the god. Gods like being shared, and they work much better when their children allow them to be whole. James said it didn't matter, because his god was the only one that was real anyway. And that made Amber cry and throw hers away. She said she didn't want a god if it wasn't real. Later, when she stopped crying, she realised that James was wrong and her god had been real after all. She went out to look for her, but I don't think she's found him yet. When my turn came to talk about my fiction, you see, it's a very old god. He was my dad's when he was a kid, and his dad too. He's really worn from being cuddled and loved so much. I don't care though, because he's a very wise god. And I tell him all my troubles in bed. Sometimes I wonder if he's nearly worn out. He can take so long to answer.
Good. Very good. Your travels. All right, okay.
Just a question come up from Australia. Jeffrey, can you put that back? I didn't catch it. Somebody else. Or did I misunderstand?
Yeah. How did your family cope with your loss of hearing?
It was profoundly challenging. We had none of us any understanding of what to expect with it. And my long-suffering family tolerated it for a very long time, it must be said. At the practical level, it meant things like the television being turned up to ridiculous levels of volume. And in the end, they all left the room. They couldn't sit there with me. But that then creates a dilemma, doesn't it? Because they turn it down, I can't hear it. They turn it up. They turn it up, they can't. But it was more important than that, because this reclusiveness in deafness I was talking about earlier on, where you tend not to communicate because there is too much risk in doing so, led to much change in my behaviour. Work communication stayed more or less the same because people talk more clearly in a work role than they do in personal life. But I stopped wanting to have any kind of personal contact with people. Stopped wanting to go out, couldn't do dinner parties, which had been a big thing in the past, couldn't go to parties, couldn't go to noisy environments like pubs, increasingly couldn't do anything musical like concerts. So couldn't. It became a huge strain on my family. My behavior was changing, their behaviors were changing, and eventually it played a very large part in my unfortunate divorce in 2002. So all of these events were happening around the same time. There was business crisis, there was hearing loss, there was divorce, there was the misdiagnosis of mental state. All of it was what led to this huge, enormous explosion. First in the form of a suicide attempt, and then on into a spiritual awakening. So families, I think, find hearing a very difficult thing to deal with. And if you find yourself listening to this in this position, then all I can say to you is get as much information as you can from other people who have been through and are going through this process. The reality is of a very profound challenge in hearing loss, in any disability, frankly. It's just one example. We could be talking about sight loss, we could be talking about loss of mobility. All of these represent a profound disability. Families want to support, but perhaps the biggest support of all is to be able to connect with other people that are experiencing and have experienced this condition, and to realize that you are not alone in this. You're not the only person that suffers from this limitation. But that very word, limitation, I want to use as the springboard into another aspect of this. When you suddenly find that you are confronted with what you can't do, it's very easy to become obsessed with can't and not able to. Actually, what I found from the millennium onwards with my spiritual explosion was my emphasis became very much about what I can do. So I'm far less concerned now about the things that are not open to me. And what I'm looking for all the time is, what is it that I can do to connect? What is it that I can do to show compassion? What is it that I can do to express love? Because that's what life is for. And it's in that expression of compassion and love that actually happiness itself comes as a byproduct of giving what we want to those that are around.
Definitely. Travels. Did you take Matt on many of your travels?
Two questions coming in. Did I take Matt on the travel? It was a difficulty because mostly the travel I did was long distance, either for researching books or for later speaking tours because of the books. So we came on to this one journey, hold it up at the right angle, is a travelogue. And it's called One Journey, not because it covers just one trip, but because life is a single journey. Thank you. Life is a single journey, and in that journey, we may take many, many tours and spend time with many different people in different places, but essentially, we are evolving on that journey the whole time. Now, to revert back to this question you just raised, Andrea, with regard to the dog, no, I couldn't take him. And here is a rather apt example of what that meant. So this is day 0 of the final story of the final journey covered in One Journey, which was a speaking tour in the Philippines 2018. And this section is entitled, I'm Leaving on a Jet. He's lying on my bed looking doleful. He's not been willing to let me venture more than 3 meters away from him for the last 2 days. Preparations for this trip started 6 more months ago, but he's not to know. He can't tell what I'm doing when I'm seated at my desk, emailing travel arrangements to the other side of the world. When he's ignorant of what's about to happen, he's content just to lie at my feet during the day, mug me for after dinner carrots and nag me to go to bed at 8 o'clock. And he reckons all respectable creatures should be sleeping. 3 days ago, the big black suitcase came down from the hall cupboard, and I started filling it with shirts and socks and meds and sunglasses. And that was when he knew I was going away. I found myself whistling the old John Denver tune, Leaving on a Jet. How am I supposed to tell my best friend I'll be away for 4 weeks and I'll be back for his 15th birthday when my best friend doesn't speak English? He speaks the language of body movement and eye contact, licks and cuddles, love and sadness. In these terms, he speaks more eloquently than I could ever write. For understanding the meaning of 28 tomorrows, that's a very different matter. It was in August 2017 I accepted the invitation to deliver a keynote speech to back-to-back conferences in Siem Reap, Cambodia, and Bangkok, Thailand, and then to fly on to Manila to spend 3 weeks in the Philippines, where I'd been given such a rapturous welcome the previous year. I love this wonderful, inspiring work, but each day away brings us closer to my boy's final departure, when he will leave his luggage behind and climb the metaphorical aircraft steps for a flight from which he will not. But not yet, please. Not yet, in particular. I cast my mind back to the invitation. 2 conferences, 2 speeches at each. What I find myself wondering is my relevance to an educators' conference at which every other delegate seems to be a PhD who's already published a dozen respected academic papers. And that to be followed by a dozen or more university and school presentations in the Philippines. Last year, I became adept at walking into a lecture theatre with no idea of what I was going to say and delivering a 2-hour interactive lecture on what is creativity or beauty in literature. Always the underlying question, sometimes actually spoken by a member of the audience, sometimes only implied, how do we get to do what you do? My answer was very much the same. You must learn to open yourself to the silence. You must develop the discipline to turn off the noise of external communication and learn how to recognize the awareness that is already there inside you. To permit that which is yearning in deep groans of silence, calling you to allow it to come out. And furthermore, you have to trust it enough not to question it. This has taken me a lifetime to learn. This is what, for me, the one journey has thus far been about. It is a journey that will be shared in their turn by some of these dear ones who want to walk the same path. It is the long road traversed one purposeful step at a time in the direction of enlightenment. There will be many miles to travel on this path, with much dust billowing about us as we do. It will take many lifetimes to traverse those miles.
Beautiful. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
your words and your verse and your stories. I mean, I'm really enjoying reading your work, and thanks to Carol finding the book, as we said, in Glastonbury Abbey, out of all places. Okay. Where would you like to go with your journey now?
Where do we go next is always the biggest question on our minds, isn't it? Past, present, future. We structure things, we subdivide, we create the illusion of a timeline of the passage of time, failing so often to realize that all that is this moment now. I carry memory, representations of things that, as I choose to represent it, happened further down the timeline past. I carry representations, daydreams perhaps, what might happen in the timeline future. Actually, the moment is lived here and now. If I look at some of the things I've been wanted to ask to do over the years, in recent years in particular, pre-lockdown, shall we say, there was much travel. There were pilgrimages covered in the book I've just read from, to places like Nepal to explore spiritually. There were exploration of the challenges of planetary change, ecological considerations like the trip that I made to the Amazon rainforest back at the turn of the century. There's the exploration of the power of love and forgiveness, like the trip I made to look at post-apartheid South Africa. So yes, I think there very likely will be more travel. I hope I'll have the opportunity to share what Spirit brings to me and what I have to offer, to connect with people, to, as we were saying right back at the beginning, reach across this fictitious distance that we create, to be able to touch hearts and souls, whether they be standing right next to me in the queue in the supermarket, or whether they be on the other side of the road. What I find consistently is that we're all made of the same substance. We are all one.
Mm.
Another reading, maybe?
Oh, yes. Yes, please. It's nice having somebody read to me.
I would like to read to you from my most recently spiritual book published, Forest Dawn, which came out in 2020. I know Andrena's had a chance to read.
Mm.
And this piece is called A Pound of Peace. Pound of peace, please, mate. Got a man in front of me at the queue at the market stall. His shopping bag was packed full, and I wondered how he was going to fit any more into it. Beautiful bit of peace this is, said the storeholder, weighing out a pound on the scales. You'll not find better in the market today. The customer smiled his thanks and pressed the piece down onto his bag that was already bulging with worry, regret, and frustration. It looked precariously balanced as he walked away, and I wasn't surprised to see it topple and splatter into the gutter. And what can I do for you today, sir? The storeholder's voice brought my attention back to the table. How about some pleasure for your supper? Just sprinkle a bit of indolence on it, frightening indulgence, beautiful. And I checked my wallet. Sorry, I replied, I'm all out of trust to pay you with. That don't matter, he retorted. I take all the major cards, gullibility, foolishness, ignorance, and if you've got that new one, complacency, I can even give you a discount. In fact, some of my customers just transfer what they owe on their cards month to month. You can buy with gullibility today, then move the debt onto your foolishness at the end of the month. That way, you never pay for anything. My eye was caught by an empty box in the middle of the table marked happiness. What happened to that one? Happiness? That's long gone. If you want happiness, you've got to get it when they open. People sometimes queue overnight for happiness, and they buy as much as it will carry on account of the fact that it don't last very long. You got any contentment then? Contentment? Bless me. I ain't been asked for contentment since I can't remember when. He's long gone out of fashion. And his voice dropped. I'll tell you what, he said. What you need is this. He looked about to make sure no one was watching, and he slid a box across the table to me. What is it? I said, laying his right hand. He paused, leaned over to whisper in my ear. Gratification, he said, looking a bit sad. Only it's black market, innit? So keep it to yourself. Take this. In 10 minutes, I'll guarantee you, nothing will worry you again. I pulled back, feeling threatened. So what's that? I said, nodding towards a rather sickly-looking plant at the end of the table. Oh, that's love. Don't get much call for love now. It used to be popular years ago, but it's hard work, see, and no one's willing to take trouble with it anymore. It has to be home-reared in a well-mulched soil of tenderness and watered every day with a warm solution of kindness and commitment. If you've got the patience, it will grow into a strong tea, but most folks are too busy to grow love these days. You can have this one for free if you like. I'm not likely to sell it before it dies now. I like the idea of growing my very own love. But I didn't take it, not knowing whether I was willing to make the effort. I took the gratification instead. It was really expensive and took me right up to the limit. Oh my God. At the time, I asked the storeholder as I turned to walk away. 5 minutes to midnight, he said, without looking at his watch. Thanks, I said, stepping over the piece that lay discarded in the cup. I'll be back for some happiness first thing in the morning. I might even take that love. He smiled at me. But he knew I wouldn't.
Brilliant. I read that last night. And I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a very different take on your shopping list. But yeah, it's really beautiful.
So if I may just take a moment to publicise, I have another book in the same series coming out next month in the series here at Forest Dawn. These are collections of essays, metaphorical fiction, and poetry, inspirational, spiritual collection. So there is much there that will entertain, but I hope that there is much that will also touch deep and provoke thought. If I may, I would like to read one extract from Forest Pathways that's coming out next month.
Yeah, we look forward to that. Look forward to reading that one. I may have caught up by then.
Well, this one is called Journey to the Light. More departures than arrivals, more uphill than down, more companions, fewer rivals, more crosses than crowns, more tumbling than cascading in uncontrolled descent, more hard landings notwithstanding, more hell-bound than heaven sent. Seeking Zen in motorcycles on roads that fewer travel, as the labyrinths unravel, yearning for the power of now. Ceasing chasing crystal goblets, quests for holy grails curtailed, swarms of wannabe messiahs, fewer honest men than liars, an excess of weary sound bites from well-meaning stumbling half-rights, while the air's still thick with spin and the heart's still sick within. Too many habitudes, insufficient study rooms, too many readings, not enough seedings, much internal bleeding. In the dark, the heart screams loudest to the ego at its proudest. Until, in solitary walking, where the trees will do the talking, where the insight comes through tears, opened eyes and unblocked ears. Transcendental meditation, waiting at the railway station, hearing voices, seeing visions, spirit-bathing soul incisions, come illuminating dreams. More Siddhartha than King Arthur, more alchemy, more archery than alchemy, more Celestine than prophecy, more silence than cacophony. More prostrated than abated, more indenture than adventure, more cognition than ambition, more incanting, less in ranting, more relinquishing than hoarding, more immersion, less in hoarding, fast flow channels calm to cool, more abandonment. Torching bridges for the firelight, climbing trees to touch the starlight, more humility than insight, generosity than birthright. All the reaping and the sowing, all the yesing and the knowing, all the madras and the bowing, genuflecting and kowtowing, find their end in clouds unknown on the journey. So that will be part of Forest Pathways, which will be published next month. And if I may have a small plug, like all my books, they are available on Amazon. You can find them most easily by going first to my website and clicking. The link will take you straight through to the book for purchase. So that's come up there under my name, michaelforrester.co.uk.
And I know recently you've just won an award.
No,
Shortly.
very significant. I've got a few in my time, but I was shortlisted for the Edinburgh
Listed.
Prize. They won't tell you, of course, what the outcome's going to be. So all us excited, 20 shortlisted candidates. I never found out how many people entered the competition. But then we were wondering what was going to happen, and looking at the announcement with the judges, and they do it, of course, in reverse order. First of all, they do the highly commended. The one I thought was going to win, somebody else's, I thought was going to win, actually got a commendation. I thought, oh, I wonder what that means. I worked through commendations, and no, I'm not there. And we worked through the third prize and the second prize. And I think, is it me? Is it me? And the name comes up, and it's no.
So there's another story come up.
Learning in that. There is so much learning in that. You know, you create this anticipation of what's going to happen, and so often life does not deliver that. So it was a joy not to win the prize, I must say.
No, yeah, I saw you were shortlisted, but I wasn't sure after that. So
I was happy to be shortlisted. Perhaps more next year.
So there'll be another verse regarding being shortlisted, eh?
I didn't hear that. Say again, please.
There will be another verse coming about being shortlisted.
Perhaps that's a good subject for a poem. You're right. Yes. I've seen some questions coming up on the feed.
Yeah.
Can we go back and I'll happily answer them.
Yeah. So one of them was, do you talk at other hearing groups or deaf groups to help other people?
Yes, I do. I do a great deal of public speaking. I have to confess that part of the reason for that is that one-way communication is very easy. And if you're on a stage or you're standing up in a group, you're talking that way, it's not as strenuous as when the information is coming that way. So I think I gravitated naturally to doing it. So I find myself on stages and in groups all the time. If you want to get in touch with me about a possible speaking engagement, yes, I would be very happy to look at it. We can fit it into the schedule for the year. And you will find that my email address appears at my website, but if you've got a pen and you want to write it down, it's Michael Forrester Author. All one word. Michael Forrester Author @gmail.com. And it's just come up on the link there. You can also follow me on Facebook if you'd like to do so. If you want to get in touch, Michael Forrester Author @gmail.com.
There was a question from Andrew asking, have you done any audio books?
No, there's a very good reason for that. They're extremely expensive to produce. And my methodology for distribution is to be physically present. My books sell when I meet people, whether that be at a county show, as I'll be doing some of this year, or whether that be on an international tour or on a stage in the UK. That's when people buy the books. And of course, that's physical copies. And there's a several £1,000 investment to be made in creating an audiobook. Now, there is at least one particularly, we haven't had time to read from it today, but Dragonsong, I know, would be particularly suitable for, particularly suitable for an audio book. And I would very much like to record it as an audio. So if there's anybody watching or listening to the show that can give me help with doing that, then I would be very interested to do so.
Oh, we'll put it out there.
I don't think it's a priority at the moment. So yes, I would be very glad of some technical support for doing that.
Okay. Would you like to read something from the book?
Would you like to hear something from Dragonsong? Okay.
Oh, yes. I'm enjoying being read to. Like Carol says, yeah. Have you seen him?
Questions coming up at the same time. Should we do the reading first and come back to questions? I need to explain that Dragonsong is an epic fantasy in rhyming verse. It is the story of Rebecca, a daughter of Merlin, who believes her father has ordered the murder of the man she loves. She's transformed into a dragon to take revenge, never realizing that she's been fooled and he didn't do the deed. So in dragon form, she pursues Merlin, and eventually, you have to be careful what you wish for, because eventually she gets to confront him. And it goes like this. The dragon came to Albion as morning light did touch the land, and not a sound of dragon song escaped her lips. She did stand upon the soil of Gaia once again. She stood before Arthurian court, the light of her illuminate, and for her father now she sought, and on this thought did ruminate, that he his final lesson must be taught. The sun did make the shadows long, did harmony a mighty roar exude, and thus did Dragonsong resound once more, and mothers held their children to their breasts. And those that then did walk abroad fled to their homes at rapid pace, and those who had did take their swords and hid themselves in safest place, and put their breastplates close upon their chests. For all did know the fearful sound, and all were truly terrified. The dragon song did now resound, and once again it did abide in Gaia, and still worse, in Albion. Then roared harmony and rage, "Show me my father, bring him here, for nothing will my hater sage, until I see him kneel in fear, and shed his blood of Ida, who is gone." But nothing did disturb the sound of wind that blew between the trees. No battle cry did there resound, no army came now her to seize. Only before her rose the blinding sun. And with no warning nor with sound did Merlin stand before the court, and thus did occupy the ground, the very place that she had sought to tear him bodily, as had been done to Vidar long ago. But she now never forgot. Her memory would ever last, and in her heart was fully set, however much the dragon nature was. And Merlin gently lifted up his voice, and to his daughter spoke. "My love child, thou didst surely suffer bitter drink. Thy heart did break, and ever in this pain it is engaged. Canst thou hear me, child, or is thy mind deluded so? And is thy nature now too wild to take on human form and go and walk with me and talk with me this day?" The dragon stood its ground. And deep within a tiny sound, a single word it had been taught. Repeat with meaning, so profound. 'Twas righteousness, a word she could not say. Her voice did growl from deep within. "Why hast thou been the cause of death? And was my lover lost in sin, that thou shouldst leave me thus bereft, and aching now into death's arms to fly? For thee now, no love I have, but hold thee just in deep contempt. But unto thee my gift I'd give, and then my anger would be spent. My father, 'tis a perfect day to die!"
Tell me, do you when do you get your inspiration? Is it throughout the day, or do you set aside a time to write? Does how does your channel flow in?
The overall answer is when I let go. I can't do what is recommended for writers. You must set a particular time. You must have your writing hour. It doesn't work for me. I need to let go to let spirit come where it comes and say what it wants to say. It's not possible for me to control that effectively. If I try to influence it, the quality just goes. It's no good. what I have found is that there are particular circumstances that are most conducive to allowing that to happen. And for me, the best of all is to walk in the forest. I live about, it's 5 minutes drive from the New Forest. Very, very fortunate where I live. And I will walk in the forest, and it will generate awareness, generate connections, generate thought processes. I always carry a little notebook, but these days, actually, with the technology being what it is, I take my phone and I dictate into it. And then I email that to myself, and I've got the guts of something that will become whatever it's going to become, short story, spiritually inspirational piece, or whatever. And I will work that up in a more disciplined way at the desk through several drafts. And indeed, it's worth saying that that is a lot of what Forest Pathways is about. It's about a series of exploratory walks in solitary circumstances, particularly in the New Forest, which generates then awareness and connection to spirit, and generates inspirational material, whether it be metaphorical fiction or essay or poetry, like we've heard. And I have learned to let go of that and not to try to control it. That's what I want to do, because as soon as you constrain it, it's not as good as it would have.
Oh, well, we're coming near the end. Is there anything else you would like to share, or any words of wisdom before we close today?
Oh, I'm just so happy to be with you here today. It is just such a joy to help you connect. If I can just leave one single message. We're on a journey, are we not? One journey. A journey to the light. We're learning and we're growing through a whole of that time. So allow that journey to take you where it wants to. Focus on what you can do, not what you can't do. Because we're all so prone to this, oh, well, I'm just not very good really, I can't do that. Actually, no. There is such wonder, there is such capability, such power, such illumination, just there. Create the circumstances, follow the circumstances that allows them to emerge, to be what you are here to be, to spread that light, to share that joy, because it is in doing that that happiness emerges as a byproduct of love and compassion. That is everything I ever have to say about anything. One way or another, all comes back to that.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing today. It's been an absolute delight, and having somebody read to me, well, it was magic. And I know the listeners, a lot of the listeners have enjoyed listening to you read your stories and share your wisdom. So we'll catch up when your new book comes out. We'll meet you for a cup of coffee.
I would be delighted.
Yeah, so
I shall be proudly displaying my new book.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you so much for being our guest this week. It's been an absolute delight. Right, that's it, folks, for this week.